Greetings and a warm welcome to Australia-China Media Watch. In this episode, we're looking at news reports starting from Monday, the 31st of January, running through to Sunday, the 6th of February 2022. During the course of the week, there were 12 mentions of Australia found in the Global Times, and in contrast, there were 3 mentions of China from Sky News Australia's website. Let's begin unpacking the news coverage for the week. Starting with the Global Times. The first article in question was published on the 2nd of February in the Society section of the Global Times. The headline over here reads, "Skiing blossoms in Altai. The origin of human skiing thanks to winter sports fever, brought by Beijing Games." It comes with a subheader from Xinjiang to Olympics, and this was published by the following authors: Fan Anqi, Xing Xiaojing, and Qiao Bingxin in Altai. Published 2nd of February 2022 at 4:48 p.m. with an update on February 5th, 2022 at 2:04 a.m. This article comes with an accompanying video and a number of images. And the first paragraph reads, "Under the gaze of the world, 2 young Chinese athletes placed a torch in the center of a giant snowflake during the grand opening ceremony of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games, making it an innovative and low-carbon Olympic cauldron. One of the 2 athletes, Denagir Yila Mujiang, is a 22-year-old of Uyghur ethnicity, hailing from Altai of China's Xinjiang region. Denagir was born in the Altai prefecture, located in the northern part of the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, widely acknowledged as the birthplace of human skiing. Since 2009, the prefecture had promoted skiing classes amongst primary and middle schools, and together with a dozen of children, Denagir was trained by her father, a skier who once claimed second prize in a national competition in 1993. Let's have a closer look at Australia's involvement in this article. And it looks like it appears a number of paragraphs down, and this is what it says. After Beijing's successful bid to host the Winter Olympics, experts from 18 countries, including Norway, Russia, Japan, and Australia, paid a visit to Altai to study the potential origin of human skiing activity, after which they jointly issued a declaration on January 18, 2015, recognizing Xinjiang's Altai as the earliest skiing region in the world. No further mentions of Australia is found in this article. And I think it can be argued that Australia here is presented here in a neutral towards somewhat positive representation. This article, after all, acknowledges that Australia has actually paid a visit to this location and were involved in issuing the declaration in 2015, recognizing Xinjiang's Altai as the earliest skiing region in the world. So based on this first impression, I think it's going to range between neutral to somewhat positive. Start archiving the information, and this would be neutral to somewhat positive, and not forgetting the URL. And now we move along to the next piece. The next article was published on the 2nd of January as well by the Global Times in the opinion/viewpoint section. The headline reads, "The Beijing Winter Olympics are a symbol of multipolarity and international friendship." Published at 1:24 p.m. The article comes with an accompanying image, and the captions of that photograph reads, "A Beijing resident takes a photo of the Beijing Winter Olympics mascot, Xue Rongrong, sculpture on January 20th, 2022, the solar term of greater cold, when the capital city saw its first snowfall this year. Photo credits CNS Photo. The opening paragraph reads, with over 30 heads of state and governments gathered in Beijing to attend the opening ceremony of the 2022 Winter Olympics, in spite of the pandemic, which is still raging in most parts of the world, the Games will prove to be a symbol of deepening multipolarity and global solidarity. A tiny handful of imperialist countries led by the United States tried and failed to coordinate a so-called diplomatic boycott based on absurd and debunked fabrications about the treatment of Xinjiang's Uyghur population. When Joe Biden announced a year ago that diplomacy's back, most people around the world hoped he had a more positive program in mind. Tellingly, the only countries that have supported this highly undiplomatic boycott are the same countries that have been waging genocidal wars on the Muslim world for the last 2 decades. Britain, for example, was an enthusiastic participant in the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. One wonders why it didn't boycott its own London 2008 Olympics as a statement of condemnation of its state terrorism in the Middle East. Let's continue unpacking the article, and Australia is mentioned once in the 4th paragraph, and this is what it reads. On the other hand, one group of countries that unanimously supports its AUKUS, a security pact formed in September 2021 consisting of Australia, the UK, and the US. Everybody understands that the purpose of AUKUS is to extend neo-colonial hegemony into the Pacific. The so-called diplomatic boycott is merely a propaganda arm of that same project. It is a weapon of the new Cold War. Based on this first impression, one might make the argument this is a clear case of othering offensive, the construction of a negative and repulsive other. That is a big tick indeed. We'll move along to the next piece, but before we do so, let's keep a record. And that would be, I'll argue, a neutral construction, not a neutral, my apologies for that, a negative construction of Australia. Moving along to the next article. Published on the 3rd of February 2022, with the headline reading, US officials come or not come to the Beijing Olympics? Chinese people don't care. This was found in the opinion/viewpoint section of the paper. Published February the 3rd, 2022 at 12:13 p.m. with a further update February the 3rd, 2022 at 12:05 p.m. That's a strange one, moving back in time. And this was authored by Jerry Gray. The article comes with an accompanying image, and the captions for the photographs reads, delegation members of Serbia and volunteers pose for selfies at the Olympic Village for the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics in Yanqing district of Beijing, capital of China, January 31st, 2022. Delegation members and volunteers celebrated the Chinese Lunar New Year, or the Year of the Tiger, at the Olympic Village on Monday. Photo credits Xiao Shaowen from Xinhua. The opening paragraph of this article reads, the athletes are in place. All the articles and short videos we see on social media say they are happy, comfortable, being well looked after, and enjoying China's newest technology with great beds, robotically prepared meals, and amazing facilities in a healthy environment, separated from the anxieties of COVID-19. The following paragraph reads, there have been political boycotts of the Olympics before, related to apartheid, Cold War, human rights or politics, but the one most remembered was led, as it is this time, by the US government, which sent no athletes and no officials to attend the 1980 Moscow Olympic Games. The irony of that decision was their reason: the invasion of Afghanistan, something the US troops themselves did some 20 years later, and remained in that country for the following 20 years. 4 years after 1980's Moscow Olympic Games, citing security concerns, the USSR led a boycott of the Los Angeles Games. The strangest aspect of this 2022 Winter Olympic boycott seems to be that the reasoning this time is based on unproven allegations and a complete disregard of all the evidence to the contrary, as well as a lack of desire to establish the veracity of any or all of the claims being made. Australia is mentioned once in the article, and this is what it says. Even more embarrassing is the fact that after announcing the diplomatic boycott, the US applied for and were granted 46 visas so they could send quote-unquote officials, most of whom apparently work for the Department of State, meaning they are, for all intents and purposes, diplomats. The US asked others to boycott, but the response was at best lukewarm. Canada, Australia, and the UK, of course, all Five Eyes Intelligence Corporation nations agreed. New Zealand are reported to have agreed, but sent a letter to the Chinese organizers as early as October, 2 months before any boycott was announced, stating they would not be sending officials due to COVID-19 concerns. Based on this first impression, I think I might make the argument that Australia is not constructed here in a positive manner, but clearly one that is negative as well as repulsive. Let's document the information, copy and paste the URL, negative. We'll move along to the next article. Published on the 4th of January. 4th of February 2022 at 8:58 p.m. In the Observer section of the Global Times, this headline reads, US media feeling sour at wit's end by smearing Beijing 2022 guest list. The article comes with an accompanying image by the photographer Li Hao, and it looks like an extreme long shot of the opening ceremony. We'll have a look at the opening paragraph. The paragraph reads, when Beijing is about to present an unforgettable, even potentially one of the best Winter Olympic Games ever seen to the globe, the Western world, especially the US, finds nowhere to place the sense of loss and depression, except for monologuing time and time again on its outdated anti-China cliches. At the moment, certain US media outlets are slandering not only China, but also global leaders attending the opening ceremony. The next paragraph reads, on Thursday local time, the CNN clamored that the Olympic guest list heavy on strongmen and autocrats, arguing around half of those dignitaries hail from authoritarian countries, with several others listed as hybrid regime. When the Wall Street Journal covered the guest list on the same day, it also quoted a Western Observer as claiming that Chinese foreign policy in the last 2 years has managed to get only autocracies and countries dependent on China to provide it recognition. Once again, the media outlets are displaying they are at their wits' end. They have no alternative but turning to the tricks as old as hills, attacking his rival by calling it autocracy or authoritarian to divide the world. Australia is mentioned once in this article, and the paragraph appears 1, 2, 3, 4 before the concluding paragraph, and this is what it reads. Carlos Martinez, co-founder of the No Cold War campaign, tweeted, just a little bit ironic that the US, Britain, Canada, and Australia are carrying out a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics, ostensibly due to China's mistreatment of Uyghur Muslims, and yet not a single Muslim majority country is supporting this boycott. Not to mention, quite a few leaders of Muslim majority countries have come to attend the ceremony. This may have, to some extent, mirrored a reality the US and some Western countries refuse to see. Based on this first impression, would this qualify as the construction of a negative and repulsive other? I think that deserves a strong and affirmative tick. Would this be seen as a foil for indirectly fashioning a positive and attractive self-identity? I believe so. This article clearly drawing a line in the sand. Let's start to collect some of the data into the archive. Parking the URL, and one might make the argument, once again, based on this first impression, a negative representation. Moving along to the next article, and this is also published on the 4th of February 2022 in the diplomacy section of the Global Times. The headline reads, Xi meets Putin, stressing strategic coordination to better tackle external interference. Initially published on the 4th of February 2022 at 4:02 p.m. and then updated on the same day at 8:48 p.m. The opening paragraph of the article reads, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday afternoon, stressing the further deepening of back-to-back strategic coordination in upholding international fairness and justice, and adhering to the four consensuses in supporting each other's sovereignty, security, and development interests to better tackle external interference and regional threats, as they exchanged views on a series of major issues regarding global strategic security and stability. In the following paragraph, the meeting in Beijing, the first face-to-face between the two leaders in 2 years, took place ahead of the opening ceremony of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games. After the meeting, the two sides issued a joint statement on international relations in a new era and global sustainable development, to elaborate their common stances over views on democracy, security, and order. The joint statement said that a small number of forces in the international community continue stubbornly to promote unilateralism, adopt power politics, interfere in the internal affairs of other countries, undermine other countries' legitimate rights and interests, create frictions and confrontations, and hamper the development and progress of mankind. The international community will not accept this, it said. China and Russia share the understanding that democracy is a universal human value, and rather than a privilege of a limited number of countries, and that its promotion and protection is a common responsibility of the entire international community, according to the joint statement. Let's continue unpacking the article, looking for Australia's mention in this instance. And it appears 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the 7th or 8th paragraph. And this is what it reads, linking us back to the AUKUS alliance. The two countries also share serious concerns about AUKUS, the pact among the US, the UK, and Australia, calling on the countries to fulfill their nuclear and missile non-proliferation commitments in good faith and to work together to safeguard peace, stability, and development in the region. So would this qualify as an example of othering offensive? Based on this impression, I think the answer would be A pretty solid yes. Drawing a line in the sand, constructing Australia as a negative and repulsive other, indirectly fashioning a positive and attractive self-identity for the partnership, the strategic partnership between Russia as well as China. It looks like we are on a very negative streak so far with the articles covered. And let's move along to the next article. Published on the 5th of February by the Global Times staff reporters at 2:30 p.m. This headline reads, "Officials, athletes amazed by short but spectacular opening ceremony of Beijing 2022." The opening paragraph reads, "Splendid, amazing, and spectacular are some of the words uttered by officials and athletes from around the world at the opening ceremony of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games. Some officials highly praised the ceremony, and athletes shared their excitement and cheered the unprecedented sights and the eco-friendly ideas presented with high technology at the Bird's Nest Stadium." We'll have a look at mentions of Australia, and it looks like it appears once in closer towards the end of the article itself. And this is what it says. "The opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics was also under the world spotlight. Canadian media outlet The Globe and Mail called it short but vibrant, and the Los Angeles Times said the Beijing Winter Olympics opened with a scene of calm, while Fox Sports Australia described it as an incredible ceremony." No further mentions of Australia is found in this article, and based on this first impression, one might make the argument that Australia, in this case, is represented in a somewhat positive light. We'll move along to the next article, published on the 5th of February by the authors Chen Qingqing and Hu Yuwei. This is found in the diplomacy section of the Global Times, with the headline reading, "Unprecedented China-Russia ties to start a new era of international relations not defined by the US." The subheader reads, "Joint statement highlights close coordination, rejects US hegemony." Published February the 5th, 2022 at 12 a.m. and then further updated on the same day at 2:22 a.m. The article is accompanied by a photograph, and its captions read, "Chinese President Xi Jinping meets and holds talks with visiting Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Diaoyutai State Guest House in Beijing on February the 4th, 2022. Photo source, Xinhua." The opening paragraph reads, "Following the highly anticipated meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday, China and Russia issued a lengthy joint statement that elaborated on shared views and consensuses on major global and regional issues and delivered a scathing rejection of the US-led West's hegemony that increasingly threatens global security and stability, a move that experts say ushers in a new era of international relations." During the meeting ahead of the opening ceremony of the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympic Games, Xi stressed the further deepening of back-to-back strategic coordination between the two countries in upholding international fairness and justice and adhering to the four consensuses in supporting each other's sovereignty, security and development interests to better tackle external interference and regional threats. The two countries' broad consensuses on almost all core issues related to global strategic stability, expressed during the meeting of the two leaders and stated in the nearly 6,000-word joint statement, are extremely rare and will further boost close strategic coordination that helps ensure global stability and peace, Chinese experts said. The joint statement, which focuses on international relations in a new era and global sustainable development, extensively expounded on common positions on democracy, development, security, and order. Australia is mentioned in the next paragraph, and this is what it says. The joint statement mentioned US at least 5 times and contained the two countries' common stance on a number of key regional and global issues, including firm oppositions or serious concerns over the expansion of NATO eastward, the West-led ideological clique in the name of democracy, the US's Indo-Pacific strategy that threatens regional stability, the trilateral security partnership among Australia, the US and the UK, and US domestic and overseas bioweapons activities. Based on this first impression, I think this is a clear example of the othering offensive in play. Is Australia constructed as a negative and repulsive other? I believe the answer is yes. A negative in this instance. This next article was published on the 6th of February in the diplomacy section of the Global Times, with the headline reading, "Huge uncertainties exist on Blinken's Asia tour. US to make Quad more integrated impossible." The article comes with an accompanying image, and its captions read, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken testifies before US House Committee on Foreign Affairs on the Biden administration's priorities for US foreign policy on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. on March 10th, 2021. The opening paragraph reads, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Monday will embark on his tour to the Asia-Pacific region for the Quad meeting in an attempt to push back against China's expanding influence. However, experts on Sunday said huge uncertainties linger for reaching any consensus with real meaning amongst Asian countries, and that forming the Quad into a more integrated or stronger alliance is impossible. Experts believe Blinken's tour amid a mounting crisis over Ukraine implies the US still places going against China as its top priority. However, the US's scheme to promote economy-related affairs with the security mechanism to target China may not allure Quad members due to doubts towards the US. Other than pointing fingers at China's internal affairs, any consensus with real meaning is not expected to be reached, experts predicted. During his tour next week, Blinken is scheduled to have talks with Indo-Pacific allies, including a meeting of foreign ministers of the four-nation Quad, according to the US State Department. Australia is mentioned multiple times in this article, and looks like they all appear in the most of them appear in the same paragraph. And let's begin by unpacking this first mentions. And it reads, the Quad meeting with members of the US, Japan, India and Australia will be held in Australia. Blinken is scheduled to depart Washington on Monday and stay in Australia from February 9th to 12th for the Quad meeting. Later, he will visit Fiji before heading to Hawaii to meet with his Japanese and South Korean counterparts to discuss the North Korean issue. Australia is mentioned again in a later paragraph, and that reads, Sin explained that China constitutes no threat to the countries within the Quad, even as China is continuing to add impetus to its economy. Thus, it is unlikely that Japan, India or Australia would opt to become the spearhead of the US to entirely go against China. Is this drawing a line in the sand? I would believe the answer to that is a firm yes. In terms of the nature of the construction of Australia in this instance, my first impression would be to label it as negative, maybe somewhat negative. And with that, we'll move along to the next article. Also published on the 6th of February, this article is headlined GT Voice, Lithuania Delusional in Diversifying Supply Chains. Published February the 6th, 2022 at 8:30 p.m. The opening paragraph of the article reads, Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis would visit Singapore and Australia from Sunday to Thursday with a view of opening up new opportunities for Lithuanian exporters in advanced and stable markets in Asia and Oceania and diversifying its supply chains, according to a press release from the Baltic States Foreign Ministry. While it is justified for Lithuania to strengthen its ties with Asia-Pacific economies, attempt to use such ties to support its challenging of China's core interests is doomed to fail. Despite efforts to ease the pressure Lithuania is facing on foreign trade by means of expanding exports in Asia, it's worth noting that neither Singapore nor Australia have the potential to become an economic pivot, allowing Vilnius to continue its mistakes that harm China's national sovereignty. We'll take a closer look at mentions of Australia. So that was the first mention of Australia. The next mention of Australia appears in this paragraph, and that reads, in fact, Landsbergis' trip to Singapore and Australia may be of more symbolic meaning than of having any economic significance. The economic structures of Lithuania and the two countries are not highly complementary. Also, given the slow economic recovery in Asia in the post-pandemic era, it is conceivable how difficult it will be for Lithuania to open up any new markets in the region. No further mentions of Australia is found in this article, and based on this first impression, I think I'll make the argument that this is constructing Australia in a somewhat negative and repulsive light. We'll move along to the next article. This next piece was published on the 6th of February 2022 at 6:47 p.m. The headline reads, Beijing Winter Olympics, Mankind's Triumph, and authored by Herman Tew Laurel. The opening paragraph reads, as the Beijing Winter Olympics opened on Friday, with up to 3,000 international athletes and participating officials and twice the number of world leaders as they were in the past Summer Olympics attending, and all foreign participants expressing enthusiasm and satisfaction with the preparations and hospitality, we can already say this year's Winter Olympics has triumphed, despite the cynical efforts to disrupt it and the challenges posed by the pandemic. Speaking from the perspective of a Filipino and member of the ASEAN, I can say that the enthusiasm for the games in our region is indeed genuine and effusive. Imagine our tropical countries sending our athletes to compete in winter games that we do not have in our countries. For instance, the Philippines is cheering its one-person team of Asa Miller, who will be competing in the alpine skiing events. He has become quite a celebrity in the country. Let's have a look at mentions of Australia, and looks like appears once purely for context. And this reads, among RCEP members, South Korea, Japan and Australia sent large delegations to the Games no matter what some governments say, and render politicized perspectives moot and academic. Other ASEAN countries are also ardently participating. It is amazing to see athletes coming from across the globe to be one with the spirit and games of the Beijing Winter Olympics. Delegations have come from Latin America and Caribbean, Peru, Chile, Haiti, Trinidad, Tobago, Africa, Eritrea, Ghana, Madagascar, Morocco, and Nigeria also joining, giving an idea of the extent of enthusiasm and participation. In fact, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation expressed in November 2021 that it opposed the politicization of sports. No further mentions of Australia is found in this article, and based on this first impression, one might make the argument that Australia is presented here in a somewhat positive light, being a fellow member of the RCEP. The next article is published on the 6th of January with the headline, India plans to export coal, and China unlikely amongst the buyers, according to an expert published February 6, 2022, 6:19 p.m. The opening paragraph reads, Indian coal miner Coal India plans to export part of its coal output to India's neighbors, according to a Reuters report published on Friday. Analysts pointed out that the quality and amount of Indian coal remain unclear. We'll have a closer look at mentions of Australia, and looks like appears once in the 4th paragraph, and this is what it reads. Major coal buyers such as China, Japan, and South Korea in the region used to import coal from Indonesia, Russia, and Australia with acceptable price and quality. According to the report, nearly 3/4 of India's electricity is generated by coal, and the country is suffering from a routine regional power crunch. Based on this first impression, I think I'll make the argument that Australia is represented here in a factual manner, and I will label this as a neutral construction. We'll move along to the final piece for the week. This article has the headline, Time for a Referendum on British Monarchy, the UK's own brand of exploitation, by the author Mark Blacklock, published February the 6th, 2022 at 5:05 p.m. The article comes with an accompanying photograph with the following captions. Britain's Queen Elizabeth II smiles during a reception in the ballroom of Sandringham House, the Queen's Norfolk residence, on February 5th, 2022, as she celebrates the start of the Platinum Jubilee. The opening paragraph reads, Queen Elizabeth II is the world's longest reigning living monarch, and this month the UK will celebrate her Platinum Jubilee with a series of events to commemorate her accession to the throne 70 years ago. We'll have a look at Australia's mentions, and it appears once in the 4th paragraph of the article, and that reads, These realms range from the tiny palm-fringed South Pacific islands of Tuvalu, population below 12,000, to large states like Australia and Canada, with total populations of more than 60 million. Their parliamentarians even take an oath of allegiance to the Queen and not to the people they represent. Many of the royal ceremonial and constitutional duties are performed by viceroys and governors in her absence. Neo-colonialism, anyone? No further mentions of Australia is found in this article, and in this instance, would this qualify as a construction of Australia as a negative and repulsive other? I believe that makes a firm yes. This concludes our look at articles from the Global Times mentioning Australia, 12 mentions in total. We'll move along to Sky News Australia. The first article mentioning China from Sky News Australia has the following headline. Dangerous partnership forming between Russia and China, published January 31st, 2022 at 8:23 a.m. And the article comes with an accompanying video 5 minutes and 46 seconds in duration. The opening paragraph or line reads, Liberal candidate for Warringah, Lincoln Parker, says a very dangerous partnership is forming between Russia and China. What we are seeing now is Russia moving closer to China to supply oil and gas, particularly if Germany doesn't go ahead with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, Mr. Parker told Sky News Australia. And the UK Sunday Times reported that the Russian ambassador to the United Kingdom recently said that we are moving forward in terms of our relationship with China. So now we're seeing a very dangerous partnership between Russia and China, particularly where China backs Russia and Russia supplies energy supplies to China. In this instance, is Sky News Australia constructing China as a negative and repulsive other? The headline perhaps gives a clue with the clear choice of word, dangerous partnership. Negative indeed. No offer is provided in this instance. And there it goes into the document. And we move along to the next piece. This article comes with the headline, Concerns. China will turn the Winter Olympic Games into some sort of diplomatic coup. Published February the 2nd at 6:37 p.m. The article has an accompanying video, 3 minutes and 48 seconds in duration. The first line of the article reads, Sky News host Chris Kenny says there are concerns China would turn the Beijing Winter Olympics into some sort of diplomatic coup, a bit of a soft power bonus. Mr. Kenny spoke with Liberal Senator Eric Abetz about the issue. The brutality of this regime, its egregious human rights abuses are such that it was not deserving of holding the Olympic Games. In this case, a clear example of the othering offensive in play. Is China being constructed as a negative and repulsive other? I believe the answer is yes. No offer is provided in this instance. Let's copy and paste the URL. And negative will be the label based on this first impression. Moving along to the next article. And this was published on the 3rd of February with an accompanying video, 2 minutes and 9 seconds in length. And this headline reads, Scott Morrison warns an Albanese Labour government could appease China, says national security at stake at the election. This was found in the Defence and Foreign Affairs section of the Global Times. The subheader reads, Scott Morrison has taken a swipe at Anthony Albanese's national security credentials and said the opposition leader could appease China should he form government, by the digital reporter Tyrone Clark, published February the 3rd, 2022 at 11:35 a.m. The opening paragraph reads, Prime Minister Scott Morrison has warned Australia's security is at stake with the next election and said opposition leader Anthony Albanese could oppose China in the ongoing trade stoush with the global superpower. In an exclusive interview with Sky News Australia host Paul Murray, the Prime Minister hit out at Labour's national security credentials, arguing Mr. Albanese would take an each-way bet on the defence of the nation. No one doubts my resolve when it comes to standing up to those who are going to have a crack at this country, Mr. Morrison said. I always put Australia first. I never take an each-way bet on national security. Mr. Albanese said last week that while it was China's position on trade which had transformed, it required a change from Australia. China has changed its position, it's changed its posture, and that requires a change from Australia, he said. China should certainly withdraw some of the actions that have been taken to stop Australian products going to China. The Prime Minister slammed his opposition counterpart and said the Australian government couldn't choose which industries should be protected from China's coercion. what he's saying to the Tasmanian lobster farmers or the beef producers in central Queensland up there in Rockhampton or the wine growers down there in South Australia, Mr. Morrison said. Which one of these is he going to trade off? Because in national security, there are only really two causes you can go down. You can appease or you can stand up for what you believe in as a country, and no one has any doubts about our government when it comes to which path we'll take. China has engaged in an ongoing trade war with Australia, slapping massive tariffs on barley, wine, beef and coal that has forced producers to look to other markets to fill the gap left by their largest buyer. It comes after Deputy Labour leader Richard Marles rejected claims that the Morrison government has an advantage on national security and refused an alternative offer or approach, apologies, to China's assertiveness. If that's where the election's going to be at, then we're willing to have it on those terms, Mr. Marles told Sky News Australia on Wednesday. Mr. Marles said while China continues to shut off its market to key Australian industries, Labour was not going to make any grand statements before the election to try and fix the relationship. We're not going to make any grand statements or pretenses around that, he said. The situation we have with China's assertiveness, the situation we have in terms of trade, those are steps that have been taken by China. Obviously, it's a very difficult relationship and we need to deal with it in the best possible way for Australia's national interest. And we're not going to pretend that it's simple, that we're going to wave a magic wand after the elections. Based on this first impression, I think it's pretty clear that Australia is being represented here or China, rather, apologies for that. China here is being represented in a negative and repulsive manner. Let's document the information behind the article. And there goes the URL. In terms of where this sits in the spectrum, I think it's a pretty clear negative representation of China. And this concludes our look at Sky News Australia with its 3 articles mentioning China. I'm just going to double check that I've not missed out on any. I believe this article that's come in was published outside of the weekly range, but it appears I've made a mistake. This was published on the 6th of February, Sunday at 9:53 a.m., which means I'll need to make a correction. It looks like there were 4 mentions of China in Sky News Australia for the week, as opposed to the 3 that was brought up at the beginning of this podcast. Apologies once again. The headline for this article reads, Russia and China unite to release statement criticizing AUKUS alliance. The article is accompanied by a video 1 minute and 16 seconds in duration. The opening paragraph of the article reads, Presidents Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin have united to release a statement criticizing Australia's nuclear submarine agreement with the United States and United Kingdom, says Sky News political editor Andrew Clarnell. We saw last June a G7 plus group including Australia meet in Cornwall in a show of strength from liberal democracies, Mr. Clarnell said. Well, here is something of a reply from Russia and China. No other mentions of China is found, and one might make the argument based on this first impression that this is a negative portrayal of China. And with that, this concludes our look at Sky News Australia, 4 mentions of China. Looking at Global Times, 12 mentions of Australia. Thank you so much for tuning in to the 12th episode of the Australia-China Media Watch podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe, or even better, leave a comment or to show some support, or if there are any blind spots in the production of this podcast, I look forward to your feedback. Thank you so much once again for tuning in. This is the ACMW signing out.